What you've just seen is perhaps the cheapest build I've ever done. Made from a bunch of lonely spare parts, used deals, and AliExpress experiments. I think this will make someone very happy. The price breakdown is shown on screen, and you might say that these are not repeatable by most people. And truthfully, you're right. A lot of these parts just simply had no build that they could be a part of, or they were destined for landfill. I suppose I was lucky in that respect that I was able to get these parts. But let's start with breaking down the parts and indeed the video card first up. The ELSA, yes, ELSA, I've not heard of this brand either, RX 580 8GB. I got this from AliExpress for a total of £61, including the shipping and all the import taxes and stuff. It's not mega cheap, but there's little else at this price point that's worth getting. I was kind of hoping for, a David Does Tech Stuff, pit of despair, and it would make a very comedic video, but I was pleasantly surprised by what you're getting. It's a basic but legitimate looking box. The card itself was genuine and performed as expected. It had basically an unassuming look with a cooler that I would describe as fine. It had some heat pipes in it. It was pretty cheap, but it doesn't take much to cool an RX 580. The CPU was another AliExpress find, the Ryzen 5 2600 coming out of the woodwork, this time at a pretty nice price of £39. It's quite old now, but the price is kind of decently low. It's probably worth getting the Ryzen 4500 for around £60 if you're building it yourself. The only problem there is making sure that any boards that you pick up have the right BIOS to support this. The benefit of AM4 processors as a whole is that it's very upgrade friendly, and I actually had a stock cooler laying about which I slapped on as well. It all makes it nice and easy to put together a budget build on AM4 with a good upgrade path. And speaking of the upgrade path, the motherboard I got for £65 on eBay, and it's a used Asus B450 Plus. I don't think this is the best deal. I would have expected to be able to get a half decent motherboard for a lot less. Problem is, I needed an ATX board to fill this case up. It would have just looked really weird with a micro ATX. So the board itself was in pretty good condition. The CPU socket arm was a bit loose, and actually some of the socket was almost coming away. But by holding that socket down whilst putting the CPU in, I was able to get it to work okay. Once the cooler's on there, it's no problem at all. For the memory, it wasn't really any point getting any used stuff because the new stuff is just so cheap now. We got 16GB of Corsair Vengeance Black RAM for £34. That's enough said, really. I didn't go for more than 3200 MHz because it's going to be really hard to get that to run on a Ryzen 2600. Ryzen 2600 aren't really known for getting the best out of your memory, so 3200 is a safe bet that's definitely going to work. We got a new power supply as well. We never go with used power supplies unless they're power supplies that I've had through my business or somewhere I've known the track record of it. But I got this Corsair CX650F actually quite a while ago now for £44 on Amazon, and that's probably the best deal you're going to get on a decent quality 650 watter. You could easily, of course, go with a 450 or a 500 on this build, but I really wanted to gear this build for upgradability in the future, and that 650 watt power supply is going to give you just that. Now, onto the case, which was obviously featured at the start of the video, cleaning it up. It's the Lianli 011 Dynamic. We've done quite a few builds with this case on the channel. It's really popular. This one had been a little bit neglected, so I actually had this as my personal build before, and I put a whole water cooling setup in it, hardline tubing and everything. Had to bend some of it in order to get the water cooling stuff to fit in. And I was actually just going to throw it out because it was in pretty poor condition. It was really dirty. There was bent bits all over it. But I thought, no, I want to be a bit more environmentally conscious, so decided to rejuvenate it simply using some water from the hose and a bottle of fairy liquid. We also added a few Bionics fans in there as well. And overall, after all this cleaning and the fans being put in, it actually looked pretty good. Now, you might think that hosing down a PC is dangerous, but it really isn't in most cases. Just have to be sensible. Give it a once over with a towel afterwards. Make sure you're leaving it somewhere dry for at least 24 hours, which is what I did here. If you want to be a real stickler, you could wrap up those case cables, the USB stuff, all that kind of stuff. Put it in a sandwich bag or some cling film or something to protect it from the water. But I didn't think it was really needed. The case was going to be going in the bin anyway, so I wasn't really too worried. And that brings us on to the completed build. Just like your mum, it's not stunning, but it's good enough for a bit of fun. No flashy RGB, just clean and simple. Personally, I prefer this to a cheap RGB case with no airflow, for example. 1080p gaming, just fine on this PC, aiming for sort of medium to high settings depending on the game. It's a little underwhelming to just be getting this kind of standard in 2023, but at this price of sub £300, or even dollars depending on where you're living, I suppose that's to be expected, isn't it? You'd likely get a nice boost from upgrading that CPU to start with. Something like a Ryzen 5600 would make a really nice, juicy upgrade over a couple of generations. Whilst the PC is pretty decent just for picking up and playing straight away, I think the real value here is in the upgrade path. I think you've got a great case, you've got an AM4 platform, and you've got a 650 watt high quality power supply. That's going to give the lucky recipient a great upgrade path for the future. A simple CPU and GPU upgrade could bring this PC into the current gen with ease. Maybe a Ryzen 5600 and RTX 4060, or like a 6700 XT, something of that ilk. Now, I'm going to sell this PC personally in my local area for around £350, but I'd probably cave if somebody offered £300 or thereabouts. I didn't really do this one for profit, just for a bit of fun. I want to know, do you folks think £300 is a good deal for this as kind of a starter PC? Overall, what did you think of the build, the aesthetics, its value? I used my own money for this one, so it's not for sale at PC36.co.uk, but if you like our style here on Concept Soup, and you should head over to PC36.co.uk. If nothing else, just to browse the PCs that are on offer to get some inspiration for your own build in the future. Hope you're having a pleasant Sunday, and until next time, I'll catch ya.